I'm Willow, I'm 23, and the day my mother told me I'd get nothing from my father's will, she didn't even blink. Her hand rested casually on the stack of papers, glossy nails tapping the exact page that cut me out like I was a typo. You're not getting a single cent, she said, looking straight into my eyes as if she were commenting on the weather. The lawyer cleared his throat. My stepfather Mark folded his arms with that smug little smile, and my half-sister Emily stared down at her phone. In that moment, something inside me cracked, and then it hardened. They thought I was helpless. They had no idea they'd just created the most patient enemy they'd ever have. My story doesn't start in that cold, beige lawyer's office. It starts 15 years earlier, in a cramped kitchen that always smelled like coffee and burnt toast, with my dad spinning me around to a scratched-up rock song on the radio. Careful, Willow, he laughed as I stepped on his feet. You're going to break my toes before you break hearts. I was 8. Wearing mismatched socks and my favorite faded purple t-shirt. My mom, Claire, was standing at the counter, arms crossed, watching us like we were doing something wrong just by being happy. James, she said sharply, you're going to make her wild. She already doesn't listen. Dad rolled his eyes and winked at me. Wild girls change the world, right, Bug? That was our little bubble. Dad and me versus the constant storm cloud that was my mother. Back then, she wasn't cruel in the obvious way. It was quieter than that. A raised eyebrow when I laughed too loud. A sigh when I brought home an A instead of an A+. A tight smile when Dad hugged me for too long. I didn't realize until much later that my mom didn't like that I was my father's favorite person. When I was 13, everything shifted. That was the year Mark appeared. He came in like a gust of cologne and fake charm. Tall, expensive watch, to white teeth. Mom met him through work, which was her way of saying she met him at one of those networking events she loved more than being home. Dad and Mom were already fighting a lot by then. Money, time, expectations. Me. We're not happy, Willow, Mom told me one night, standing in my doorway like a judge delivering a sentence. Your father is too soft. He doesn't think long term. Dad, meanwhile, sat on the edge of my bed later and rubbed his eyes. I'm trying, Bug. I swear I'm trying. It's just never enough for her. Within a year, they were divorced. Mom moved out first, into a nicer apartment closer to the city with Mark. I stayed with Dad in our old house at first because the court said I could choose, and I chose him. My mom never forgave me for that, even though she pretended she did. You're making a mistake, she hissed one night when she dropped me off. You'll see who really takes care of you in the end. That sentence would echo in my head again, a decade later in that lawyer's office. The best years I ever had were those 3 years alone with Dad. We didn't have a lot, but we had peace. He made pancakes for dinner. Sometimes, let me paint my room a ridiculous shade of teal. He bragged about my grades to anyone who would listen. He also said something over and over that I didn't fully understand at the time. No matter what happens between your mother and me, I will always make sure you're taken care of, he promised. Legally, financially, emotionally. My will already says that. You'll be okay. I'd roll my eyes and say, Dad, you're only 42, you're not going anywhere. But he insisted. Estate planning, Bug. It's boring. But it matters. This house, the savings, the life insurance, all of it is to make sure you never have to depend on anyone who doesn't truly love you. Anyone. He meant my mother. I didn't know that one day those words would be my lifeline. Dad got sick when I was 16. At first it was just fatigue. Then it was maybe a virus. Then suddenly it was stage 4 pancreatic cancer and a countdown nobody wanted to say out loud. Mom reappeared like a vulture that smelled blood. She started visiting more, bringing Mark with her and grocery bags full of things Dad hadn't asked for. We're just trying to help, she would say sweetly, patting Dad's arm a little too hard. You've always been so disorganized, James. Luckily, Mark is great with money. I hated the way Mark walked through our house like he was measuring it. In those months, there were closed-door conversations I wasn't part of. Papers on the dining table that disappeared when I walked in. Half-finished sentences that stopped when I came down the stairs. Once, I heard my dad raise his voice, a rare, weak kind of anger. That's not what we agreed, Claire, he snapped. You're not cutting Willow out of anything. I froze in the hallway. She's not responsible with money, my mother replied coldly. You said it yourself, she's emotional. She needs guidance. Guidance isn't the same as control. Dad shot back. I heard chairs scrape, footsteps, and then silence. When I asked him about it later, he just smiled tiredly and changed the subject. Dad died 6 months later. The house felt too big without his music, his coffee smell, his clumsy humming in the mornings. The day after the funeral, Mom showed up with Mark and my half-sister Emily, who was 10 at the time and already a miniature version of my mother, polished, bored, and glued to her phone. Mom didn't cry. Not once. She just moved through the rooms like she was doing inventory. "These will all have to be dealt with," she murmured, fingering the framed photos. "The will needs to go through probate. It's a lot of work, Willow. You should be grateful I'm handling it." I was too numb to argue. She told me there'd be a reading of the will later, once things were sorted. I didn't doubt for a second that Dad had kept his promise. I should have. Fast forward to that lawyer's office 3 years later, when I was 19 and halfway through college. I'd been scraping by on scholarships, part-time jobs, and the tiny bit of money Dad had left in an account with my name on it. I thought the house had been sold to pay off his medical debt and that anything left would come to me eventually. Instead, I was sitting across from an older man with silver hair and gentle eyes, Mr. Carter, the estate attorney, while my mother rewrote my reality in a flat, bored voice. "This is the final will," she said, pressing her manicured hand on the stack. "Executed 3 months before James passed." I blinked. "But Dad told me your father changed his mind," she cut in. "He realized you're not ready to handle that kind of money. So the estate goes into a trust under my control until Emily is of age. You, Willow, will receive." "What was it again, Mark?" "A small stipend," Mark said with a practiced sigh, "to help with basic needs, assuming you stay cooperative." It was Mr. Carter who couldn't keep up the mask. He adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "Willow, your father did have a previous will that provided for you more extensively. This revision is somewhat different from what he and I originally discussed." "Different how?" My voice came out too thin. My mother smiled like a cat. "He wanted to correct his mistake, that's all. He was on heavy pain medication," Mr. Carter added quietly. That was when Mom turned to me completely, eyes hard, and spoke the words that branded themselves onto my brain. "You're not getting a single cent, Willow. Not until I decide you deserve it. And if you keep questioning me like this, you might not see a cent at all." The room went silent. I felt my cheeks burn, my throat close. For a second, I thought I might actually beg. Instead, something inside me went cold. "Fine," I said. "If that's how you want it." Mark smirked. Emily didn't even look up. They thought that was the end of it. It was actually the beginning. For a while, I survived on anger and cheap coffee. I moved into a cramped apartment with 2 other girls near campus and picked up more shifts at the cafe where I worked. I sold my dad's old guitar, one of the few things I'd managed to keep to cover a surprise fee on my tuition. At night, I lay awake replaying that scene in the lawyer's office. My mother's expression, Mark's smugness, the quick, guilty look in Mr. Carter's eyes when he mentioned the original will. I couldn't let it go. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about what it meant. Dad had promised. He had intentionally made plans to protect me from exactly this kind of manipulation. And somehow, my mother had managed to twist even his last wishes into a power grab. One rainy evening, after a double shift, I sat at my tiny desk and typed "and do influence will contest" into the search bar. The more I read, the more my fury hardened into something sharper. There were cases, tons of them, where last-minute wills were thrown out because someone had taken advantage of a dying person. Patterns like isolation from close family, sudden changes that favored one party, and a vulnerable testator on heavy medication. It was like reading a checklist of my father's last months. I didn't have money for a lawyer, but I had something my mother completely underestimated. I had patience, and I had nothing left to lose. My revenge didn't start with a dramatic confrontation. It started with a visit to Mr. Carter. He looked surprised to see me when I walked into his office, soaked from the rain in my thrift store coat. But after a moment, he invited me in and closed the door. "Willow," he said gently, "I'm sorry about how things unfolded. Your mother was very firm." "Did my father look firm?" I asked, sitting down. "When he came in to sign those new papers." Mr. Carter hesitated. There it was, that tiny crack. "I can't discuss all the details," he began carefully. "Attorney-client privilege." "I'm not asking for secrets," I interrupted. "I just want to know. Did he seem like himself?" The old man exhaled slowly. "He was in a great deal of pain. He was confused at times. He often deferred to your mother in those final meetings. Did he ever come in alone to request those changes?" I pressed. "Or was my mother always there?" Silence. Always, he admitted. That was all I needed to hear. I started digging, quietly. I requested Dad's medical records. It took time, paperwork, and what felt like 100 phone calls. But eventually, a thick envelope arrived in my mailbox. I read through every page, highlighting every note that mentioned morphine. Confusion, disorientation. I reached out to old neighbors. Mrs. Harris across the street remembered seeing my mom's car in the driveway constantly. But me? She said there were weeks when my mother didn't want you to stress him and sent me home early. She wrote me a statement. Dad's friend from work, Daniel, told me over coffee that Dad had confided in him. He was worried. Willow, Daniel said, stirring his cup. He told me he'd already set things up for you and that your mom was trying to fix it. His words, not mine. He also wrote me a statement. Piece by piece, I collected proof that my father had been vulnerable and my mother had been opportunistic, but I still didn't have a lawyer. The universe, or maybe Dad, sent me Ava. She was in the caf one slow afternoon, typing furiously on her laptop with a stack of color-coded folders beside her. She ordered the same drink 3 days in a row and always tipped well. On the 4th day, her card declined. She laughed it off, pulled out another one, and joked, "That's what I get for going solo. Being a baby lawyer is not glamorous." Lawyer? I repeated, my heart tugging. Estate and probate stuff mostly, she said. Dead people and money. Super fun. I don't know what possessed me, but the words just came out. What would you do? I asked. If someone's dad changed his will right before he died while on heavy pain meds, and the new will magically gave everything to the ex-wife who hated his kid. She looked up, eyes sharpening. I'd ask why you're asking. She replied, so I told her. Not everything, but enough. She listened, really listened. No interruptions, no judgment, just the occasional question to clarify a detail. When I finished, she sat back and let out a low whistle. That, she said, sounds a lot like undue influence. Yeah, well, I don't have money for a lawyer, I muttered, wiping down the already clean counter. Good thing I need clients more than they need me, she said lightly. Then her tone shifted. Look, I can't promise anything. Cases like this are hard, especially when the person is gone. But if what you're saying is true, there might be grounds to contest the will. We could at least try. Maybe on a contingency. What? If we win, I take a percentage. If we lose, you owe me nothing but coffee. I stared at her. Are you serious? She smiled. Dead serious. Pun intended. That was how my quiet revenge became an actual plan. For the next year, my life had to tracks. On the surface, I was the struggling college student my mother expected. I answered her occasional texts with short, polite replies. I even accepted her invitation to Emily's birthday party one time, just to keep up appearances. Underneath, I was building a case. Ava helped organize everything. Medical records, witness statements, email printouts I dug up from Dad's old account where he talked about his original will and his intentions for me. We met in her tiny office twice a month, surrounded by dusty law books and takeout containers. You're doing great, she'd say when I started to doubt. Just keep remembering, this isn't about greed. It's about honoring your father's wishes. It was also about something darker. If I'm honest, it was about making my mother feel even a fraction of the helplessness she'd made me feel. When we finally filed the petition to contest the will, my mother's calm facade cracked. She called me Etta, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. What do you think you're doing? She hissed. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is for me? Oh, I'm sure it's tough, I said, my voice shaking but steady. Imagine how humiliating it was to be told by your own mother that you're not worth a cent. This is Mark's money too, she snapped. Emily's future. You're being selfish, Willow. Dad worked for that money, I replied. Not you, not Mark. And he intended it for me. I'm just making sure his voice is heard. Since you did everything you could to silence it. There was a long pause. You will regret this, she said finally, her voice low. I will make sure of it. I hung up before she could say more. My hands were shaking, but instead of feeling small, I felt lighter. The court date came faster than I expected and slower than I wanted. On the morning of the hearing, I stood outside the courthouse in a too big blazer Ava had lent me, my palms sweating. You ready? She asked. No, I admitted. But I'm here, inside. Seeing my mother almost made me turn around. She was flawless, of course. Perfect hair, impeccable suit, a pearl necklace I'd never seen before. Mark stood beside her, jaw clenched, while Emily scrolled on her phone, older now, but still distant. When my mother's eyes met mine, there was no warmth, only raw, simmering anger. The judge listened as Ava laid out our argument: Dad's original will, his clear intent to provide for me, his rapid decline, the medications, the timing of the changes, the fact that my mother was present for every meeting and had everything to gain. Then my mother's attorney painted me as an ungrateful, unstable child, desperate for money. I didn't deserve. It hurt. Of course it did. But the real turning point came when Mr. Carter took the stand. Under oath, he had to tell the truth. He described my father's condition, the confusion, the way my mother had taken the lead in conversations, the pressure to update things quickly, the fact that my father never once spoke to him alone about his supposed change of heart. I had concerns, he admitted, his voice low, but ultimately it was James's signature. I didn't feel I had the authority to refuse. Did he ever explicitly say he wanted to cut Willow out? Ava asked. He closed his eyes briefly. No, he said he didn't want her to be overwhelmed. That's all. It wasn't a smoking gun, but it was enough to shift the energy in the room. When it was my turn to speak, my legs felt like jelly, but I forced myself to look at the judge. Not my mother. My dad wasn't perfect, I said, but he was consistent. He spent years telling me he'd set things up so I could be okay without depending on anyone else. He talked about it. He wrote about it. He even emailed his friend about it. I thought about all the nights I'd cried into my pillow, all the days I'd dragged myself through classes on no sleep. I'm not here because I want a pile of money, I continued. I'm here because his last few months were stolen from him, not just by cancer, but by people who used his pain to rewrite his love. My voice cracked on that last word, but I didn't apologize. When I stepped down, I finally allowed myself to look at my mother. For the first time in my life, she looked rattled. The judge took a few weeks to issue a ruling. In that time, I tried not to hope, but the day the decision came, Ava called me, her voice trembling with something like excitement. We didn't get everything, she said, but we got enough. The court found that there was sufficient evidence of undue influence to invalidate the last-minute will. The previous will, the one my father had drafted when he was still healthy, was reinstated. It split his assets between a trust for me and a charity fund he'd wanted to set up for underprivileged kids who wanted to study music. My mother still got something, but nowhere near the full control she'd grabbed for herself and Mark. Mark, by the way, had been quietly siphoning money from some of the accounts during probate. Ava discovered it while poring over financial records, and the court ordered him to pay it back with penalties. He glared at me in the hallway after the ruling like I'd ruined his life. Maybe I had. My mother didn't speak to me at all. She just brushed past me, her perfume hitting me like a slap, and walked out of the courthouse, heels clicking too loudly on the polished floor. Emily hesitated for a second, looked at me as if she wanted to say something, then followed them. I watched them go and realized something. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. The money changed my life. Yes, I moved out of the tiny shared apartment and into a small studio with sunlight and a door that locked properly. I paid off my student loans. I set up an automatic monthly donation to Dad's music charity fund. I also started therapy, because revenge, even when it's justified, doesn't magically heal the little girl inside you who grew up thinking your mother's love was something you had to earn. I haven't spoken to my mother in over a year now. She's tried to reach out a few times, mostly when she wants something, but I'm done being her emotional, financial, or reputational punching bag. Sometimes I still think about what she said. You'll regret this. I don't. I regret not standing up for myself sooner. If you're still listening to my story, here's what I want you to take away from it. People will tell you to let it go, to be the bigger person, especially when the person hurting you is family. But sometimes being the bigger person means saying, no, you don't get to rewrite reality without a fight. My revenge wasn't about screaming matches or dramatic confrontations. It was about using the truth, patience, and the system my mother thought she owned to undo the damage she caused. My dad used to say, wild girls change the world, right, Bug? I don't know about the whole world, but I changed mine. If this story made you feel something, anger, hope, recognition, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, what would you have done if your own mother told you that you didn't deserve a single cent of your father's love or legacy? Because trust me, You deserve more than they ever wanted to give you.